March 28, 1943, Luftwaffe Tactical Headquarters, Deelen Airfield, Netherlands. Major Egon Mayer studied intelligence photographs of the new American fighter scattered across his desk. The silhouette was unmistakable. Massive single-engine design, blunt nose, 8 weapon ports visible along each wing. His annotation in the margin of the intelligence report, preserved in Bundesarchiv records, revealed the German Fighter Command's initial assessment, Amerikanische Verschwendung. 8 heavy machine guns on single-seat fighter represents typical American excess, tactically wasteful. The word Mayer used, Verschwendung, translates directly as wastefulness or squandering. To experienced Luftwaffe pilots who had mastered the art of precision cannon fire, the P-47 Thunderbolt's 850 caliber machine guns represented everything wrong with American military thinking. Crude, excessive, inefficient, overkill. In its most literal sense, more firepower than any rational combat doctrine required. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. They were about to learn why American engineers had installed those 8 guns. The education would cost the Luftwaffe 3,752 aircraft, countless pilots, and their fundamental understanding of aerial warfare. The German concept of overkill, Übertötung in technical military terminology, carried specific meaning in Luftwaffe doctrine. It described employing more destructive force than necessary to achieve a tactical objective, wasting ammunition, weight, and complexity on redundant capability. Luftwaffe fighter development throughout the 1930s had emphasized efficiency. One well-placed cannon shell could destroy an enemy aircraft, therefore multiple cannons were wasteful. Skilled pilots needed only precision, not saturation. This philosophy had produced some of the war's most elegant fighter designs. The Messerschmitt Bf-109, with its single 20mm MG-151 20 cannon and 2 13mm MG-131 machine guns, represented refined lethality. Total armament weight, 173 pounds. The Focke-Wulf FW-190A, considered heavily armed by German standards, carried 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns, with armament weight of 342 pounds. By contrast, a P-47 Thunderbolt carried 8 Browning M250 caliber machine guns. The weapons alone weighed 640 pounds. Add 2,800 rounds of ammunition at 1.71 ounces per round, and the total armament package exceeded 940 pounds, nearly triple the entire armament weight of a Bf-109. German engineers examining captured P-47 specifications dismissed the design as Amerikanische Gigantomanie, American gigantomania, the irrational pursuit of excess size and power. Technical assessment reports from Rechlin Test Center criticized the Thunderbolt as overweight, overarmed, and over-engineered. The 8-gun armament specifically drew contempt. One Rechlin analysis stated, "The installation of 8 heavy machine guns represents failure to understand modern air combat. Weight penalty reduces performance. Complexity creates maintenance burden. Ammunition expenditure becomes unsustainable. This design reflects industrial abundance masking tactical ignorance." Oberst Adolf Galland, general of the fighter arm, shared this assessment initially. In early 1943 staff meetings, he characterized American firepower doctrine as brute force, compensating for poor marksmanship. Luftwaffe fighter tactics emphasized deflection shooting, the ability to hit maneuvering targets with minimal ammunition expenditure. Ace pilots prided themselves on kills per round ratios. Major Erich Hartmann, the war's highest-scoring ace with 352 victories, was famous for closing to point-blank range before firing single, precise bursts. The German philosophy held that a skilled pilot with limited ammunition was more effective than an average pilot with unlimited firepower, quality over quantity, precision over saturation, the warrior's art over industrial excess. This wasn't mere arrogance, but deeply embedded doctrine supported by early war success. In the Battle of France, German fighters had achieved overwhelming victory with their cannon-armed designs. In the Battle of Britain, limited ammunition had forced tactical discipline that many credited with improving pilot skill. When P-47's began arriving in Britain during late 1942 and early 1943, Luftwaffe intelligence assessed them as minimal threat. The assessment dated February 15, 1943, circulated to all fighter groups, concluded, "New American fighter carries excessive armament, unsuitable for high-altitude combat. Weight penalty limits climb rate and ceiling. Against experienced pilots, represents no significant threat beyond existing American types." The Luftwaffe was about to discover why Republic aviation engineers had insisted on 8 guns, why American ordnance designers had selected the 50 caliber Browning, and why operational doctrine called for overwhelming firepower rather than precision shooting. April 8, 1943, marked the P-47's first major engagement with the Luftwaffe. The 4th Fighter Group, flying Thunderbolts on bomber escort mission, encountered JG-26 over the Belgian coast. Hauptmann Johannes Seifert led the German formation, 12 FW-190s positioned for standard head-on attack against B-17s. Instead, they met 12 P-47's at 26,000 feet. Seifert's combat report, filed later that day, captured the moment. Close to 400 meters for cannon attack, American fighter ahead suddenly erupted in continuous fire. Not burst fire as expected, but sustained stream. My wingman's aircraft hit before evasive action possible. Feldwebel Kruger's 190 disintegrated, not exploded, not burned. Came apart like paper in wind. Never witnessed such destruction from machine gun fire. What Seifert had encountered was the mathematical reality of 8 synchronized 50 caliber machine guns. Each Browning M2 fired 800 rounds per minute. Together, the 8 guns delivered 6,400 rounds per minute. That translated to 106.6 rounds per second, every second, for up to 33 seconds of continuous fire. The convergence pattern made the mathematics even more devastating. P-47 guns were harmonized to converge at specific range, typically 200 to 300 yards. Within this convergence zone, all 8 gun streams intersected, creating a cone of destruction approximately 8 feet wide by 12 feet tall. Any aircraft entering this zone absorbed multiple simultaneous hits from 8 different angles. A single 50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary round carried enormous destructive energy. The Mate API round weighed 1.71 ounces and left the muzzle at 2,840 feet per second. Impact energy exceeded 13,000 foot-pounds, enough to penetrate aircraft armor, shatter engine blocks, and sever structural members. Multiply by 106 rounds per second, and the destructive force became incomprehensible by previous combat standards. Hauptmann Seifert's wingman, Feldwebel Hans Kruger, had absorbed approximately 40 to 50 rounds in less than 1 second. The FW-190's robust construction meant nothing. Rounds penetrated the engine, shattered the prand, cockpit, severed control cables, ruptured fuel tanks, and destroyed wing structure simultaneously. The aircraft didn't explode in the dramatic fashion of cannon-struck fighters. It simply lost structural integrity and came apart, transformed from aircraft to debris in the time required for 1 heartbeat. Seifert survived the engagement, but his assessment, attached to the combat report, revealed the psychological impact. If these reports represent standard American armament, we face weapons philosophy completely alien to our doctrine. They are not attempting precision. They are attempting annihilation through overwhelming force. This requires tactical reassessment. Fighter Command dismissed Seifert's concerns as combat stress. Major Gerhard Schöpfel, Commodore of JG-26, annotated the report. Experienced pilots maintain discipline and avoid concentrated fire. American wasteful expenditure of ammunition represents no advantage to skilled opponents. This assessment reflected broader Luftwaffe confidence that superior pilot training and tactical skill would overcome American material advantages. The confidence lasted exactly 4 months. By August 1943, the Luftwaffe's perception of American overkill had fundamentally changed. The transformation began with the Schweinfurt raids. August 17, 1943, First Schweinfurt raid. The Luftwaffe committed over 300 fighters to intercept unescorted B-17s attacking ball-bearing factories. Intelligence indicated P-47's would turn back at the German border due to range limitations. Instead, Thunderbolts equipped with experimental belly tanks escorted bombers 100 miles into Germany, far beyond expected range. JG-11, expecting to attack defenseless bombers, encountered massed P-47's at 28,000 feet. The subsequent battle produced the highest single-day loss for both sides to that point in the air war. But the Crude exchange ratio told the story. Americans lost 36 B-17s to all causes. Germans lost 27 fighters to P-47's alone, with catastrophic damage to another 15 aircraft. Major Gunther Specht, operations officer for JG-11, filed a detailed after-action report that challenged previous assessments. The American 8-gun armament proves devastatingly effective in actual combat. Their pilots need not achieve precise hits. They simply place their aircraft approximately on target and fire. The volume of fire guarantees multiple hits regardless of evasion attempts. Traditional combat doctrine based on maneuvering for position becomes irrelevant when facing such firepower concentration. Specht's report included technical analysis based on examining wreckage of destroyed German fighters. One Bf-109G recovered near the target showed 43 impact holes from 50 caliber rounds. Reconstruction indicated the aircraft had been hit during a 2-second burst. The pilot, Lieutenant Franz Weber, had been killed instantly when multiple rounds penetrated the cockpit. The engine had been destroyed. Both wings had suffered structural failure. The destruction was absolute, total, and had occurred in less time than required to complete one evasive maneuver. The report concluded with a statement that shocked fighter command. American 8-gun armament does not represent overkill. It represents systematic doctrine designed to guarantee destruction while minimizing pilot skill requirements. They have democratized aerial combat. Average American pilots with 8 guns achieve what previously required exceptional German pilots with cannons. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, read Specht's report with mounting anger. His response, preserved in staff meeting minutes from August 23, 1943, revealed deep resistance to acknowledging American superiority. German pilots are best trained in world. American industrial excess cannot compensate for our tactical superiority. Reports of overwhelming firepower reflect insufficient aggression from our pilots. The solution is not to fear their guns, but to close more aggressively and employ our superior marksmanship. This response demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of the tactical revolution P-47 firepower represented. The Luftwaffe continued fighting with doctrine designed for different weapons, different tactics, and different opponents. Reality would force adaptation, but only after devastating losses. September through November 1943 brought systematic encounters between P-47's and German fighters across the Western Front. Each engagement reinforced lessons about firepower concentration. Statistical analysis compiled by Luftwaffe Operational Research in December 1943 revealed disturbing patterns. Average ammunition expenditure per German fighter victory: 120 rounds of 20mm cannon fire, 240 rounds of 13mm machine gun fire. Average ammunition expenditure per P-47 victory: 350 rounds of 50 caliber fire, representing approximately 3.3 seconds of trigger time. The Germans were using nearly all their cannon ammunition for each kill. Americans were using 1/8 of their available ammunition per kill, maintaining capacity for multiple engagements per sortie. More troubling were the damage assessments. German cannon hits often produced dramatic explosions but didn't guarantee kills. B-17s especially proved capable of surviving multiple cannon strikes. The 20mm MG 151-20 fired explosive shells, devastating against fighters, but often insufficient against heavy bomber structure. 50 caliber rounds, while lacking explosive filler, penetrated deeper and created cumulative structural damage. 8 guns, firing simultaneously, created multiple penetrations that destroyed airframe integrity even when individual hits weren't immediately fatal. Hauptmann Hermann Graf, who would finish the war with 212 victories, encountered P-47's repeatedly during this period while commanding JG-50. His observations, recorded in unit diary entries, tracked the evolution of German tactical thinking. October 4th, 1943. Engaged P-47's at 24,000 feet. Traditional head-on attack proves ineffective. Their 8 guns create wall of fire impossible to penetrate. Lost 2 aircraft attempting frontal approach. October 15th. Attempted diving attacks from above. Americans climb to meet us, deliver bursts during head-on pass. Their ammunition supply allows sustained fire we cannot match. October 29th. New tactic. Attack from extreme deflection angles where their 8 guns cannot all bear simultaneously. Some success but requires perfect positioning. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Graf's diary revealed the central problem. Every counter-tactic to P-47 firepower required perfect execution under combat stress, while facing opponents who could afford imperfect shooting. The mathematics increasingly favored American pilots. They could miss repeatedly and still have ammunition remaining. German pilots who missed even slightly had exhausted combat-effective ammunition load. The psychological pressure on German pilots intensified throughout fall 1943. Young replacement pilots, already struggling with reduced training hours due to fuel shortages, faced combat scenarios where American firepower negated any skill advantage they might develop. Experienced pilots found themselves avoiding combat against P-47's, seeking easier targets like stragglers or damaged bombers. January 1944 brought technological additions that widened the already significant firepower gap. Late production P-47D variants began receiving the K-14 computing gunsight, a gyroscopic lead computing system that automatically calculated deflection based on target range and movement. This eliminated the most skill-intensive aspect of air combat gunnery. Combined with 8 guns, the K-14 made even novice pilots devastatingly effective. Hauptmann Heinz Baer, an ace with 220 victories who would survive the war, described encountering K-14-equipped P-47's. February 9, 1944, engaged Thunderbolts northwest of Frankfurt. American pilot in stern attack position maintained perfect tracking despite my evasive maneuvers. His fire followed my aircraft exactly, not leading or lagging. Realized he was using some form of computing sight. Received 12 hits before breaking engagement. Aircraft barely reached base. This technology, combined with 8 guns, makes defense nearly impossible. The computing gun sight, which cost more than many complete German fighters, represented another example of American industrial philosophy applied to warfare. Rather than requiring years of training to master deflection shooting, American engineers created technology that automated the process. Combined with overwhelming ammunition supplies, this approach produced pilots who achieved effectiveness in months that traditionally required years of experience. Production statistics compiled during early 1944 revealed the full scope of American industrial mobilization. Republic Aviation's 2 facilities, Farmingdale, New York, and Evansville, Indiana, were producing 790 P-47's monthly by March 1944. Each aircraft required 8 Browning M2 machine guns. Total monthly gun production for P-47's alone exceeded 6,300 units. German production of all fighter types peaked at 1,580 aircraft monthly in July 1944. This total included multiple designs: BF-109, FW-190, ME-410, ME-263. The production of armament for these fighters struggled with raw material shortages and bombing damage to manufacturing facilities. By mid-1944, some German fighters were delivered with mixed armament due to cannon shortages, 2 20mm and 2 13mm, instead of 4 20mm. Against this production reality, German pilot assessment of American overkill transformed completely. What had seemed wasteful excess in early 1943 became recognized as systematic industrial warfare by 1944. Luftwaffe operational research documents from April 1944 stated, "American 8-gun armament represents doctrine of guaranteed destruction through overwhelming force." Their industrial capacity allows this approach. Our doctrine of precision and efficiency reflects resource limitations, not superior tactics. When resources permit overwhelming force, it proves more effective than skilled precision. This admission, buried in classified documents that wouldn't be discovered until decades after the war, represented complete reversal of pre-war German military philosophy. The Luftwaffe had built its doctrine on quality over quantity, individual skill over mass production. The P-47's 8 guns had destroyed these assumptions through mathematical certainty. D-Day, June 6, 1944, provided the ultimate demonstration of P-47 dominance. The Luftwaffe managed only 319 sorties over Normandy throughout the entire day. American P-47 units flew more than 2,000 sorties. The mathematics were crushing. German pilots attempting to attack invasion beaches encountered aerial environment where American fighters outnumbered them 20-1. Major Josef Priller of JG-26 made one of the few German attacks that day, a strafing run against Sword Beach with his wingman. His report described the aerial situation. Counted over 100 American fighters within visual range. Their formations filled the sky. Individual combat became impossible. Survival required avoiding engagement entirely. The notion that we could influence the invasion outcome through fighter operations was revealed as fantasy. Throughout summer 1944, P-47's transitioned increasingly to ground attack missions. The 850 caliber machine guns proved devastating against vehicles, trains, and troop concentrations. A single P-47 could destroy an entire convoy in one strafing pass. The concentrated firepower penetrated armor that resisted smaller caliber weapons. Tank crews learned to fear P-47's more than dedicated tank killer aircraft, which carried heavier weapons but fewer of them. The ground attack role created separate trauma for Wehrmacht forces. Vehicle drivers hearing the distinctive sound of 8 synchronized machine guns opening fire experienced terror that hardened Eastern Front veterans couldn't overcome. Unlike single aircraft making multiple passes, a P-47 delivered full firepower on first pass. Vehicles hit by concentrated 50 caliber fire simply exploded or disintegrated. There was no warning, no time for evasion, just instant catastrophic destruction. Psychological research conducted by Luftwaffe Medical Services during summer and fall 1944 documented Thunderbolt neurosis among both pilots and ground forces. Symptoms included involuntary startle responses to any sound resembling multiple machine guns firing simultaneously, avoidance behaviors regarding open sky, and fatalistic resignation regarding survival. Medical officers noted this condition differed from normal combat stress. The distinctive sound signature of 8 guns firing together created conditioned fear response that persisted long after exposure. By September 1944, The Luftwaffe's pilot training system had collapsed under fuel shortages and Allied bombing. New pilots arrived at combat units with as little as 30 hours total flight time, almost no gunnery training, and often their first combat sortie as their first experience firing guns. These replacement pilots faced American pilots averaging 200 combat hours, flying aircraft with computing gun sights, and 8 machine guns that made marksmanship skill almost irrelevant. The results were predictable and catastrophic. German pilot losses during September through December 1944 exceeded entire pilot strength from December 1943. Fighter units were rebuilt 3 and 4 times during these months. Each generation of replacement pilots survived shorter periods than the RAM's previous generation. Against P-47's specifically, survival rates for new German pilots dropped below 8% through 5 combat missions. Lieutenant Gerhard Thieben, one of the few who survived this period, described his first combat encounter with P-47's. November 3, 1944, my second combat mission. Spotted Thunderbolts below us. Flight leader ordered attack. I dove on the trailing American, got within 300 meters, prepared to fire. The American reversed suddenly. I found myself head-on with 8 flashing muzzles. My aircraft was hit perhaps 50 times in 1 second. Engine destroyed, cockpit shattered, control cables severed. Everything happened simultaneously. I bailed out before aircraft entered spin. Realized later I had survived only because American pilots stopped firing after 1 second burst. Had he held the trigger 2 seconds, I would have died. Their ammunition abundance allowed mercy. Our doctrine of limited ammunition meant we fired until target destroyed. Thieben's observation captured a crucial disparity. German pilots with limited ammunition fired until targets were destroyed, unable to afford warning shots or mercy. American pilots with abundant ammunition could afford to stop shooting once an opponent was obviously defeated. This created psychological dynamic where German pilots felt every engagement was fight to the death while Americans could exercise discretion. The ammunition disparity translated into moral pressure that compounded combat stress. Operation Bodenplatte, January 1, 1945, represented the Luftwaffe's final major offensive operation against Allied airfields. The operation achieved tactical surprise, destroying numerous aircraft on the ground, but the withdrawal proved catastrophic. P-47's from rear airfields caught German formations at low altitude, without ammunition, and systematically destroyed them. The 365th Fighter Group's P-47's, taking off from Metz, intercepted German formations that had just completed attacks on forward airfields. The combat reports describe massacre rather than battle. German pilots, having expended ammunition on ground targets, could not defend effectively against P-47's attacking from altitude advantage. The 8-gun firepower permitted American pilots to destroy multiple targets in single passes. One pilot, Lieutenant Edward Giller, claimed 5 kills in 8 minutes, expending less than 900 rounds total, approximately 180 rounds per kill across multiple engagements. Total Luftwaffe losses for Bodenplatte exceeded 270 aircraft, with 143 pilots killed. Many of these pilots were experienced instructors, irreplaceable leadership pulled from training units for the operation. American losses in aerial combat totaled 16 aircraft. The exchange ratio exceeded anything previously recorded. The operation destroyed Luftwaffe fighter capability beyond any possibility of recovery. Post-war interrogation of surviving Luftwaffe officers revealed the extent to which their perception of American overkill had transformed. Major Günther Roll, who survived 275 victories to become a NATO commander, provided particularly detailed testimony. We entered the war believing cannon represented evolution of fighter armament, that multiple machine guns were obsolete. By 1945, we understood that American 8-gun doctrine reflected sophisticated understanding of combat effectiveness versus pilot skill. They recognized that overwhelming firepower delivered by average pilots produced better results than precision fire delivered by skilled pilots. When combined with industrial capacity to provide unlimited ammunition and computing gun sights to simplify aiming, their doctrine proved superior to ours. Statistical analysis compiled after the war confirmed this. Assessment. P-47's were credited with 3,752 confirmed aerial victories in European theatre operations. Against this, approximately 3,499 P-47's were lost to all causes, including 1,020 to enemy fighters, 2,479 to anti-aircraft fire and operational accidents. The aerial combat exchange ratio exceeded 3.6 to 1, demonstrating clear superiority. More significantly, the P-47 achieved this while transitioning increasingly to ground attack missions. By 1945, more than 60% of P-47 sorties were ground attack rather than air-to-air missions. Despite this shift, P-47's continued achieving aerial victories at rates exceeding dedicated fighter designs. Ground attack statistics revealed the 8-gun armament's versatility. P-47's were credited with destruction or damage to 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 68,000 motor vehicles, and 6,000 armoured vehicles. These numbers exceeded any other Allied fighter type. The 850 caliber guns proved ideal for ground attack, providing sustained fire against multiple targets without requiring precision that would be impossible in ground attack profiles. The ammunition logistics supporting these operations demonstrated American industrial capacity's full scope. Lake City Ordnance Plant in Missouri produced approximately 6.5 billion rounds of 50 caliber ammunition during the war. Additional facilities in Denver, Salt Lake City, and St. Louis produced billions more. Total American production of 50 caliber ammunition exceeded 12 billion rounds. This ammunition abundance translated directly into tactical freedom. P-47 pilots fired freely, developing techniques like reconnaissance by fire, where they would fire at suspicious terrain, features to reveal hidden targets. They strafed persistently, making multiple passes on targets. They engaged opportunistically, attacking targets that German pilots would ignore due to ammunition limitations. The freedom to fire without ammunition anxiety fundamentally changed combat psychology. German logistics, by contrast, struggled to supply basic ammunition loads. By late 1944, German fighters often flew with partial cannon loads, sometimes as little as 60 to 80 rounds, instead of standard 150. Pilots were ordered to fire only when hits were certain. This ammunition anxiety created psychological burden that degraded combat effectiveness beyond the purely tactical impact of reduced ammunition. The final production statistics told the story of complete industrial dominance. Republic Aviation produced 15,686 P-47's throughout the war. Peak monthly production reached 840 aircraft. Total production required 125,488 Browning M2 machine guns just for P-47 armament. Against this, Germany produced approximately 33,000 fighter aircraft of all types from 1939 through 1945. This total included Bf-109s, Fw-190s, Me-410 night fighters, Me-163 rocket fighters, Me-262 jets, and numerous experimental designs. No single German fighter type approached P-47 production numbers. More significantly, the P-47's 8-gun armament meant total installed firepower exceeded German fighter production by even wider margins. The 125,488 machine guns in P-47's represented more individual weapons than all armament installed in all German fighters combined. American industry had literally outproduced German industry in weapons alone by margins that made traditional military calculus irrelevant. Post-war German military culture absorbed lessons from facing P-47's. The concept of Führkraft durch Masse, firepower through mass, entered doctrine as recognition that industrial capacity to deliver overwhelming force trumped tactical elegance. Staff College instruction emphasized that future warfare required matching adversary industrial production, not merely developing superior tactics or training. The P-47 specifically became referenced in German military education as example of systematic approach to warfare. Rather than depending on exceptional pilots with precision weapons, Americans had created a system where average pilots with overwhelming firepower achieved superior results. The 8-gun armament wasn't overkill. It was systematic redundancy, ensuring mission success despite variables like pilot skill, equipment malfunction, or combat stress. Veteran German pilots who joined NATO forces during the Cold War carried these lessons forward. When consulted about Warsaw Pact fighter capabilities, they consistently emphasized that Soviet-style numerical superiority, combined with heavy armament, resembled American doctrine more than German precision philosophy. They warned that Western forces needed to adopt similar overwhelming firepower approaches rather than relying on qualitative superiority. The psychological impact on German pilots persisted decades after the war. Reunions of Luftwaffe veterans consistently featured discussions of facing P-47's. The distinctive sound of 8 synchronized 50-caliber guns remained burned into memory. Many veterans reported that even in peacetime, certain sounds would trigger involuntary stress responses associated with Thunderbolt encounters. Dr. Wilhelm Mayer, a psychologist who studied German aircrew trauma during the 1960s, noted, "Veterans of Eastern Front who faced Soviet fighters showed normal combat stress patterns. Veterans who faced P-47's showed different trauma profile, associated specifically with helplessness against overwhelming force. The 8 guns created psychological impact beyond physical danger. They represented systematic certainty of destruction that traditional combat did not produce." The technical specifications that had seemed like wasteful overkill in 1943 were recognized by 1945 as precisely calibrated to achieve systematic destruction. 8 Browning M2 machine guns firing 6,400 rounds per minute created mathematical certainty that targets entering convergence zone would be destroyed. The ammunition load of 2,800 rounds provided sustained firepower through multiple engagements. The 50-caliber projectile delivered penetration and energy transfer that guaranteed structural damage. Each element of the design reflected systematic engineering to eliminate variables. Multiple guns provided redundancy against weapon malfunctions. Heavy caliber ensured penetration against protected targets. Abundant ammunition removed combat restrictions. Computing gun sights simplified aiming. Robust construction enabled survival after damage. The P-47 wasn't one exceptional feature, but systematic integration of overwhelming capabilities. German design philosophy had pursued elegance. The minimum necessary capability delivered efficiently. American design philosophy pursued certainty. Overwhelming capability delivered redundantly. In industrial warfare fought across multiple theaters simultaneously, the American approach proved sustainable, where German efficiency proved brittle. The P-47's 8 guns embodied this philosophical difference. The final irony was that German assessment of overkill had been partially correct. The P-47 did carry more firepower than strictly necessary for many tactical scenarios. Individual victories often required only 1 or 2 guns firing. The 8-gun installation did impose weight and complexity penalties. But American doctrine deliberately accepted these inefficiencies because they guaranteed success across all scenarios, including worst-case encounters. German efficiency meant that in perfect conditions with skilled pilots, their fighters achieved excellent results. American redundancy meant that in any conditions with any pilots, their fighters achieved consistent results. Industrial warfare favored consistency over excellence. The nation that could guarantee adequate performance from all units defeated the nation that achieved superior performance from limited elite units. By war's end, German military professionals understood this lesson thoroughly. The 3,752 aerial victories credited to P-47's represented more than tactical defeats. They represented systematic proof that overwhelming force, delivered consistently, defeated elegant efficiency. The 850 caliber machine guns that seemed like overkill had proven to be precisely adequate for the task of destroying German air superiority through sheer industrial mathematics. The word overkill itself transformed in German military vocabulary. What began as dismissive term for wasteful excess became cautionary phrase about underestimating industrial warfare. Staff officers would note that proposed defensive schemes seemed adequate until encountering an opponent willing to apply American overkill, overwhelming force that negated tactical advantages through sheer volume. The P-47 Thunderbolt, with its 850 caliber machine guns, hadn't just defeated German fighters in aerial combat. It had destroyed German confidence in traditional military virtues like skill, precision, and efficiency. Those virtues remained real, but in industrial warfare fought between fully mobilized economies, they proved insufficient against opponents who could deliver overwhelming force systematically to every engagement. German pilots had called the 8 guns overkill, certain that such excessive firepower represented wasteful American thinking. The 3,752 aircraft destroyed by those guns taught them that overkill was actually systematic certainty, that redundancy was reliability, and that overwhelming force delivered consistently defeated elegant efficiency delivered inconsistently. The lesson was brutal, comprehensive, and inescapable. In the end, the German pilots' shock at being shredded by 850 caliber machine guns was not just the astonishment of men encountering unexpected firepower, it was the bewilderment of a military culture colliding with a new age of war. They had trained for aerial duels in which skill and finesse determined survival. What they faced instead was a system designed not for duels, but for annihilation. They had prepared for combat as an art. The Americans treated it as an industry. For years, the Luftwaffe's fighter doctrine had been built around individual mastery. Its great aces, Galland, Marseille, Hartmann, embodied the German belief that superior training, discipline, and machine quality would always triumph over numerical inferiority. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 and the Focke-Wulf FW 190 were conceived as high-performance instruments in the hands of experts. Their air battles were imagined as contests between knights of the sky, where the better pilot in the better machine would prevail. But industrial warfare is not a duel, it is a process. And the P-47 Thunderbolt was not built for contests of elegance. It was built to erase the concept of contest altogether. To the German pilot who first faced one, the Thunderbolt must have seemed grotesque. It was enormous, an aircraft that dwarfed the nimble fighters of Europe. Its radial engine looked more suited to a bomber than a single-seat fighter, its fuselage thick and inelegant. Yet behind that brute appearance lay the logic of American industry. Everything about the P-47 reflected a design philosophy rooted not in aesthetics or maneuverability, but in survivability, repeatability, and output. Its airframe could absorb punishment that would shatter a Messerschmitt. Its engine could continue running even when cylinders were blown apart by flak. Its sheer mass gave it diving speed no opponent could match. And most of all, its 8 Browning AN, M2, 50 caliber machine guns, 4 per wing, embodied an idea as modern as the assembly line itself. Firepower solves problems. To the Luftwaffe, the Thunderbolt's armament seemed excessive. In their design logic, a fighter needed 2 20mm cannon, or perhaps a pair of machine guns for precision strikes. Theirs was a philosophy of economy: hit cleanly, maneuver gracefully, and conserve ammunition. But American engineers and, more importantly, American strategists did not design for duels. They designed for certainty. The P-47 was meant to guarantee results through sheer probability. 8 guns meant 100 rounds on target for every 10 a German pilot might land. Each trigger pull unleashed a storm dense enough to shred anything within its path. compensating for imperfect aim, battlefield chaos, and the inexperience of replacement pilots. It was not artistry, it was insurance. It represented the principle that in an industrial war, the margin for error must be engineered out through quantity. The results were immediate and devastating. Luftwaffe pilots who engaged Thunderbolts over Europe in 1943 and 1944 found themselves confronted not just by numbers, but by a kind of mechanized inevitability. The Thunderbolt could outdive anything the Germans flew. It could withstand hits that would cripple their own fighters, and when it returned fire, it did so with the force of a flying artillery battery. Those 8 50 caliber guns fired 13 rounds per second each. In a 2-second burst, over 200 armor-piercing and incendiary rounds crossed the airspace between hunter and hunted. Aluminum tore open like paper, engines erupted, wings vanished in flame. What had been a contest of maneuver became an exercise in survival. The shock was not simply tactical, it was philosophical. The Luftwaffe's elite had believed deeply in Qualität über Quantität, quality over quantity. Their entire war effort rested on that creed. Their machines were works of craftsmanship, their training programs rigorous, their tactics honed for individual excellence. But modern war had rendered that creed obsolete. Sufficient quantity, the Americans proved, creates its own quality. When thousands of P-47 seconds and later P-51 seconds flooded the skies of Europe, each one bristling with mass-produced, standardized components, it did not matter if the German planes climbed a few meters faster or turned a few degrees tighter. The mathematics of production had already decided the outcome. The Luftwaffe was fighting a statistical war with artisanal tools. This was the deeper meaning of those 8 machine guns. They were not just weapons, they were symbols of the industrial philosophy that governed every aspect of the American war effort. The same mindset that had produced Liberty ships faster than U-boats could sink them, and Sherman tanks faster than Panthers could be repaired, had found its expression in aviation. The Americans did not optimize for perfection. They optimized for repetition. They understood that reliability, multiplied by scale, became invincibility. By contrast, German engineering pursued diminishing returns. Each improvement made their machines rarer, slower to build, and harder to maintain. The Luftwaffe's late-war aircraft, such as the Me-262 jet and the W-190D, were technological marvels, but logistical disasters. The Americans, by contrast, fielded fighters that could be built in vast numbers, maintained by mechanics with minimal training, and flown by pilots who could be replaced faster than they could be lost. The education was brutal. Between 1943 and 1945, the Luftwaffe lost 3,752 aircraft in combat with the Thunderbolt alone. Behind each wreck was a dead or captured pilot, the end of years of irreplaceable training. The United States could lose 5 planes for every German fighter destroyed and still come out ahead, because American factories replaced machines faster than Germany could train men. It was not that the Thunderbolt was perfect. It was that it was enough, and it could be everywhere. That was the essence of industrial power, ubiquity. As the air war intensified, German pilots began to speak of the P-47 with a kind of fatalistic respect. They called it the Jug, short for Juggernaut, and that was precisely what it was, a force that rolled forward relentlessly, propelled not by individual skill, but by an entire economy in motion. The Luftwaffe, built on the ideal of the ace, could not compete with a system that made the concept of the ace irrelevant. A Thunderbolt pilot did not need to outfly his opponent. He needed only to be in position, pull the trigger, and let the industrial logic of 8 synchronized guns do the rest. The lesson was clear and cruel. In modern warfare, overkill is a myth. There is only sufficiency, and sufficiency, in industrial terms, means overwhelming certainty. The Luftwaffe never recovered from that realization. By 1944, its veteran cadres were gone, its replacements undertrained, its aircraft outnumbered 5 to 1. Fuel shortages grounded entire squadrons. The skies that had once belonged to the German elite were now a mechanized ecosystem dominated by mass-produced American fighters. Every time a Thunderbolt strafed a German column, every time a flight of Mustangs escorted bombers unopposed to Berlin, the balance of philosophies played out again, the triumph of system over skill, of process over precision. The Germans still built magnificent machines. The Americans built enough magnificent machines to ensure that individual superiority no longer mattered. What the Luftwaffe experienced was more than defeat, it was obsolescence. The age of individual combat, of the lone master pilot, was over. In its place rose the age of industrialized lethality, where engineering, logistics, and production determined victory long before the first shot was fired. That transformation would define warfare for the rest of the century. In Korea, in Vietnam, in the Middle East, the principle would repeat itself. Massed firepower, sustained logistics, and technological redundancy, outlasting elegance every time. The P-47 had been an omen of that future. Its 8 machine guns were not a design quirk, they were prophecy in steel and lead. For Germany, the cost of misunderstanding that prophecy was catastrophic. It cost the Luftwaffe 3,752 aircraft. It cost thousands of pilots their lives. It cost the German military philosophy, its faith in craftsmanship as the foundation of victory. For the world, it offered a permanent lesson, that in the era of industrial warfare, the side that builds systems, not symbols, wins. The side that values replication over refinement, logistics over legend, and firepower over finesse will always prevail. The P-47 Thunderbolt did not just shoot down planes. It destroyed an idea that wars could still be won by excellence alone. And in that destruction lay the truth of the modern battlefield. There is no such thing as overkill, only different approaches to ensuring absolute certainty of mission success. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.